Hello everybody, James here. Story time with Dutch Mantell, episode 53. The 53rd episode that we've been waiting for 2 weeks. We'll probably explain that in a minute. We'll do some plugs first. We'll do the books first, actually, I think. Dutch, you've got your two. Why don't you do the plugs?
Well, this is my first book. Second book, I'm sorry. Tales from a Dirt Road. This is my first book. It's The World According to Dutch. And I was going to write a book. So I was in Puerto Rico. So this is a true story. I would go down on the beach about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I would start thinking, and I've told you this story. I'd bring me a bottle of rum. And I forgot the name of the rum. I forgot.
Malibu.
Now.
It was Senor Malibu.
It was Senor Malibu.
The assistant booker.
Yeah, and I would drink, and I would think about all these ideas about a book and what people would like to hear about. That was interesting for me to write about. And I wrote both these books. I wrote the first one in 5 weeks, and that's not working on it every day. And the second book I wrote in 7 weeks with the same formula. And I thought it was, because I read one time, if you want to write a book, so if anybody out there wants to write a book about anything, write the book. The people like it or they don't like it, but just go ahead and write it. Don't think your whole life, I need to write a book. Write it. And then go from there. But anyway, if you like anything about old school wrestling, how it used to be, these are the books for you, and you'll enjoy them. If you don't enjoy them, tell me, and I'll come and slap you, because that's what you need.
Oh.
And also, I have a website called The World According to Dutch. University of Dutch, and I'm offering diplomas for that university today. And James, you have one, except I haven't sent it to you yet.
No, you have one of mine.
Yeah, I do.
We've been plugging these for a year, and you've never sent me one.
Well, that's why people stay in my university.
I haven't paid the university fees. I think that might be the problem.
For years and years and years. But you don't have any student loans to pay. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you go through this. And if anybody is interested in having a University of Dutch diploma, email me at Dirty Dutch Mantell with what, James?
With two L's.
Two L's at gmail.com, and I'll get back to you. A guy wrote to me the other day and said, hey, I ordered a diploma and I never got it. And I looked at his name, and I don't even remember his name, because, folks, believe it or not, my memory isn't what it used to be unless I write it down in a conspicuous place where I can look it up. Yeah, you may be missing a timely delivery of a book or a diploma, but just tell me about it and I'll fix it. And if worst comes to worst, if you like my shoddy delivery service, just tell me, and then I'll refund you money. But none of that is done on purpose, and it is totally by accident.
There we go.
So if somebody asks you, talking some kind of crazy wrestling conspiracy, and they can ask you, where did you get your diploma? And you said, hey, I got it right here. And you can show them the University of Dutch diploma in a frame, signed by Zeb Coulter and Dirty Dutch Mantell. It has quite a list of honorary signers of this diploma, and it looks very nice too. I designed it. Well, I stole the design, but but I mean, the diploma looks like a diploma according to how you make it up. But it is a nice looking diploma, and you'll be happy with it. So write me there if you're interested in the books or the diplomas, and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, if I coughed all over that last few minutes. So I'm currently under the weather. Dutch was a bit under the weather last week, which is why we didn't have a podcast last week. But before we get to whatever we're going to talk about today, Owen Hart, King of Pranks. I've got 2 books there. That's the first one, What I Wrote, and the second one is Dwayne The Rock Johnson, both available from Amazon, as are Dutch's 2 books if you want them unsigned. And we have 2 T-shirts now, I'm very pleased to say. The first one, You People Mean Nothing to Me, and here is the grand unveiling of Respect the Stache.
Respect the Stache. I like that T-shirt. I really do.
In fact, I'm going to take my jacket off so it can be, or at least the hat can be seen.
What other colors does it come in?
It does come in a couple. You've really put me on the spot there, Dutch. It doesn't come in black because you wouldn't see any of it. Because it's only a black design. I think it comes in white. I think it comes in grey. It may come in a blue kind of thing. Whatever it's stood up on. Oh, get off my stupid jacket. Wrestling with my jacket for the last 10 to 20 seconds.
Oh my God.
So anyway, if you want this T-shirt... God, it's just a shambles, this, isn't it? Anyway, if you want the T-shirt, there is a link in the description of every video you see, every podcast, and that should take you straight to Teespring, where you can buy this very T-shirt in a variety of maybe 3 colours. I think the other one's got a few colours as well now. But the other thing I want to bring up as well is we're 95 star ratings on iTunes. We want 100. What happens when we get 100? Nothing. I'd just like a nice round number. And that's basically it. Should we get to our news?
Wait a minute. The 100 stars actually means nothing but to you. Is that it?
That's true. We get no plaudits. We get no little prize. We get no little bag of balloons and a pencil saying thank you for getting 100. We get nothing.
Yep. But I would like to mention that we did pick up, I think, 1,000 or 1,500 subscribers.
Oh yeah, every month. Yeah, we steadily go up.
And where are we now? 87,000.
80. Oh, you're putting me on the spot with all these numbers, for goodness sake. I mean, I don't know the colours of the T-shirt. I don't know the numbers of the YouTube. Goodness me.
Make up a number. It's like wrestling. If you don't know the answer, make something up. Act like you know.
Right, 4 million subscribers. So if you want to be the 4 millionth and first, you know where to go. I'll do. It's like, didn't we say there was a top 10 in iTunes podcasts of every genre, like wrestling podcasts, and you can't. So we just said we're 11th. You can't disprove it.
That's right. You can't disprove it.
So
if you can't disprove it, they only list the top 10, right?
They either list the top 10 or the top 15, I think. So whatever we are, we're 1 under.
I see that.
Huh.
That's actually a good philosophy to have.
Just
get right next to it, just so nobody can say, no, you're wrong. You're wrong.
This might be like an American music thing, but what do they call it? The bubbling under charts. Because like American music has got like, or at least did have like 48,000 different like adult contemporary or hip hop or indie, and then there was bubbling under, which meant they just weren't good enough to actually be in the actual charts. So basically, it's like
bubbling. Wait, I never heard that before.
The bubbling under chart, yeah.
So we're almost there, but not quite.
Do you know? Okay, right. So I would have told you this off air. But, we were looking at YouTube success-wise, and we're easily one of the most successful. You know, as far as the wrestling personality podcasts go, I could reel off a list of people we're beating if you like.
Yeah, don't do that. Well, reel off a list of people that we are beating.
Eric Bischoff, Bruce Pritchard.
We're beating him?
Yeah.
Bruce Pritchard said one time he had 300,000 subscribers.
On YouTube? No, he doesn't. Or maybe on podcasts, I don't know.
Okay. So we're beating Bischoff and we're beating Pritchard.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the king of the YouTube podcast?
Cornette.
And where's he at?
Ahead of us by about a factor of 10. He's ahead of everybody, though, in fairness. I mean, he's crazy ahead of people.
Well, he is entertaining as hell. If you can take a cuss word every 5 words.
They've had to bleep. Do you know what? I'll tell you afterwards. They have to bleep the first 30 seconds worth of swear words due to YouTube rules, which is very, very confusing. But anyway, I'm gonna leave the success of our channel and then not talk about the only channel that's more successful than ours, because that'd just be really disappointing. Anyway, I'm just gonna go straight to the news, for goodness sake. Did you watch WWE Night of Champions or AEW Double or Nothing?
Night of Champions, I did watch.
Did you really? I was expecting you to say no.
Which is a rarity for me. But I'm going to say, for me to get interested in a card, it's got to be kind of special. And I enjoyed the show. And not all the matches were bangers. That's the new word they use now, bangers. And I read something about a card that said, oh, they had a banger of a match. I don't give a shit if they had a banger of a match. They had a good match. But a lot of these banging matches, I want them to have these like 4, 5, 6 weeks in a row. Now you're drawing money with it. 2 guys get in the ring and have a good match. I mean, that's their job, to get in the ring and have a good match. That is what they're employed to do. So, but I really enjoyed some of those matches. The last one, the tag match with Roman Reigns and Solo versus Sammy and Kevin. The match wasn't that great. I don't give a crap about the match. I want to know, it's the story they're telling. And at the end, they advance that story. So as long as the story gets advanced, and this is probably one of the greatest long-term angles that I've seen in my lifetime, even beats Memphis. We never took an angle a year in Memphis. Hell, by that time, the guy could have quit twice or 3 times and come back because he got mad off a payoff or something. But this is a very good, they're getting payoffs, and it's branching out into other areas. So really, if they're smart with this could be going by next WrestleMania. So they are learning themselves right now on the job training. And I don't know if Triple H is teaching them or who leads that creative group, but I will say this, that they've done a damn good job with it.
We are, well, neither of us watched Double or Nothing, so we won't talk about that. Let's do the news then. And as you know, I should actually say our main podcast is going to be about Chris Candido and Tammy Sytch, because we both watched, well, I did anyway. You watched Dark Side of the Ring, didn't you?
Did I? I watched part of it.
Okay. Well, we lived some of it anyway, so I mean, crikey. Anyway, let's do the news, and we'll talk about Chris and Tammy. First,
wait a minute. What does crikey mean?
You're
using all this damn internal English slang. Crikey means like, what's it mean? Like,
oh,
damn,
dear.
Or okay. I've heard it before.
Oh, goodness gracious me. Something like that.
Okay, let's go.
Do you know, the amount of stuff that I have to like cut out of my lexicon that I think won't translate is like, you must have been used to this with like Adrian Street or something. So I always remember, I think he used to say you know, he wouldn't say boo to a goose or something like that. That would never translate in America.
No, it would. That means, well, you can kind of figure out what it meant. It was
timid.
Absolutely. And there was another word I saw about. Anyway, go ahead.
CM Punk. Let's talk about CM Punk. Why not? We never talk about CM Punk on this show, but anyway, we're going to do it. CM Punk has officially been announced for the debut of AEW Collision on June 17th, the debut show in Chicago by Tony Khan. We knew this for weeks anyway, but it's now official, and Punk looks to be a heel. I don't know why I've written that. I'm not sure about that. So when he made the announcement, half the arena booed, half the arena cheered. Anyway, I know I personally said that Punk would eventually return, although I never envisioned an entire roster split, whether it's a soft or hard split or only certain people won't go on the other shows, to sort of placate everybody to split the Punk and the EVPs up. Other AEW wrestlers who haven't been seen in a while will re-emerge on Collision, like Miro, aka Rusev, and Andrade, as well as Powerhouse Hobbs, Samoa Joe, Thunder Rosa being announced in the press release there. So, Collision, what are you thinking? Have you got high hopes for big ratings, and how much will Punk matter?
I think Punk will matter. maybe the first show, maybe. But it's a Saturday night. And they're starting in July. And that's only like 6 weeks before the college football season starts.
June. It's only in a couple of weeks.
Oh, June.
Yeah.
When is college football? It starts in September. Well, anyway, I think they'll get a pretty big turnout the first time. And then, but on Saturday nights, I mean, that's a bad time for television. People go out on Saturday nights. People don't stay, and they may tape it or record it and then come back and watch it. But I don't expect it doing overpowering numbers. I just don't, because if you're up against football, and then on Saturday, the pros, they play a lot of their preseason games on Saturday too, and they're up against a lot of stuff. So I wish them luck, but I don't know. But what matters is the money figure at the end. I don't care if they're going to draw people or not. That's their internal problem. But as long as what was their deal worth?
I don't know off the top. I'm not even sure it's been announced yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what was it? Go on.
Well, no one thing. I won't correct you because I don't know either.
No, all right, okay. It's worth probably quite a lot of money, I'd suggest, because Warner Bros. Seems quite keen.
I heard it was $3 trillion.
Yes, for 3.8.
And that was Tony was released $3.8 trillion. Mm-hmm. That's quite a pretty sizable sum of money.
Right. Well, do you know, just piggybacking on what you said before then, right? Yeah, college football starts, other stuff starts. Saturday's just a horrible day anyway. Two things. One, if the show's really good, people will watch. But two, guess what else is on Saturday? Wrestling pay-per-views, UFC pay-per-views, UFC free-to-air TV shows, boxing pay-per-views, all combat sports.
And McDonald's is open late. Don't forget that. And I heard Burger King is going to kind of start that early dinner service, and that could hurt them somewhat in that regard.
Is it Paul Bosch or someone like that said something like, you get like, oh, you know, this show did not so well, and he said, well, the weather was hot and it was Labor Day or whatever it is, and I'm just giving an example, and then he rattled off about 8 examples and then says, these are all the examples promoters will give to justify their shitty ratings or shitty ticket sales. But really, it's just that he didn't put it. Anyway, we're not saying that it's going to happen with AEW, but they've not made it easy on themselves.
Well, doing episodic TV, if they tell a story and they probably make it exclusive to Collision, they will pick up viewers. But as soon as it kind of breaks off a little bit, they're gone. Mm-hmm. They will leave. So somebody needs to tell AEW, get in the storytelling business. That's what it is. I mean, if you're not going to tell a story, here's wrestler A gets in there with wrestler B, and neither one of them are going anywhere. What are you going to say about that match? Oh, beautiful. I wish Gordon Soley could call some of these matches. Oh, ahead to something, suplex or whatever he would do. Actually, Gordon Soley could make a crappy match seem like a main event by the way he announced it. But unless these guys are in a story, going back to what I was saying, it's just a match. And how many matches have wrestling fans seen?
1 million?
At least.
When was the last time you really got excited watching a match during watching a match? I know you're in the business, so it's probably unfair to ask you, but like, what was the last match that really excited you?
Okay, it was, and I'll be honest here, as opposed to dishonest. It was Lawler Kaufman. I was excited to see the match or see what they were going to do. The only thing that would have made it better if I'd have slapped Kaufman. that made it a hell of a lot better.
then you would have been on the top 50 TV moments ever. Speaking of kayfabe, no wrestlers know how to keep kayfabe. Well, some do when it comes to one single backstage fight. No one's talking about this, but CM Punk was, of course, famously accosted by the EVPs after doing that, blah, blah, blah. You know what the story is. Anyway, Ace Steel was fired. He was fired for biting Kenny Omega and smashing a chair over one of the Young Bucks' heads. And he was quietly brought back some weeks ago in a remote way, back as a backstage producer, but not backstage, staying at home. And the sticking point of why Punk wasn't announced the week beforehand was because Punk had assumed that Ace Steel was going to be coming back in a physical sense to do agenting, and then that was anyway, he was taking off all the promotional material. Would you bring Ace Steel? I mean, we don't know if CM Punk's dog is going to be allowed back into the locker room either at this point. He was involved in the fight as well, but would you bring Ace Steel back?
Well, if he means that much to them, this is a Tony Khan. It's his responsibility. And if he thinks that he needs to bring Ace Steel back to entice CM Punk to come back, yeah, I'd bring him back. But this is what has happened. Tony, and I've said this 100 times. This will be my 101st time of saying it. Tony Khan is a boss. He owns the company. At some point, he has to separate the professors or the owners from the employees. You cannot be friends with the wrestlers. You cannot be friends with the employees. You can for a while, and then it will backfire on you. And this is what happened. It backfired on Tony. Tony should have took it by the balls and said, we're going to do this. And if you don't like it, hey, you can give your notice and I can get you right on out of here. I think he may have done that with CM Punk, but I think some legal action was threatened on CM Punk's on his part. And I think Tony wanted to avoid that. But still, he got a Saturday night slot with Collision. And if he has some help and a story, he may get this to work. I don't care what kind of, you could put the Bloodline on Saturday night at that time slot. I don't think you'll break $1.5 million.
Well, I'm glad you said that, actually, because I'm sort of not getting the same amount of excitement, even just in general, for Collision that Rampage got when Pink Floyd, when CM Pink Floyd debuted on Rampage. This Collision thing just doesn't seem to be having the fan interest. Maybe it's just because it's a third show and there's too much wrestling anyway. And I don't remember any fans clamouring for, God, you know what we just need? It's 2 more hours of wrestling. That'll really put us over the top.
2 more so we can kind of evaluate them and get more depressed than we already are. See, there's an old saying, you've heard it, less is more. Mm-hmm. So we didn't used to have but an hour for territories. And we do fantastic business back in those days.
But also you had a far smaller roster as well. So this is like, what, 160 odd, like over people, wrestlers over 5 hours. I mean, you had, 16 to fill 90 minutes?
Yep.
Every week? And it's great.
But that was to fill the territory. I mean, if you book 16 wrestlers, you book them, I don't know, 7 days a week sometimes. You know what? Now I'm going off the top of my head here, but you hear some of these wrestlers say, "Oh man, we got to travel this and that, and we got to fly there and get off the plane. Then we got to go rent a car, and then we got to drive 25 miles to the building and then go to the hotel, and then we got to get up and go work out." And I'm thinking, what the fuck are you talking about? Hell, in Mid-South, we do 2,500 miles a week. And sometimes we would work 7 days a week. And on the weekends, we'd do double headers when I was there.
And you had guaranteed contracts in 6 figures back then, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, we did. And we ate 7-course meals every night. a 6-pack of beer and a sandwich. That's what we had. A 7-course meal. But you either did it or you got out of it. And nobody was making the type of money just the guys in NXT were making. I don't know what guys in NXT make. I hear they don't make too much, but they shouldn't make too much. They should learn the business. Do you watch NXT?
No.
I don't watch it either. Because I don't. They have made that show. They've jacked it up. It got all kind of, I mean, it's colorful, and they got a nice little stadium or arena for it there. But I've never watched one show of NXT, and I don't intend to watch the next one.
You're going to get people writing in saying, "Oh, you've got to review NXT since neither of you've seen it before." But nah.
Well, I don't hear anything that makes me want to. I hear they're doing pretty good stuff. Shawn is there, which is fine. But after watching Succession, you don't want to hear about Succession.
No, I don't want to hear about it. I will watch it at some point. Don't give anything away.
All right.
I promise I will. I promise. I just don't have Sky Atlantic in this country, so sorry. I'm with Virgin Media for the English people.
Okay, Succession, for the people that have watched it, was a great show, but it had some glaring inconsistencies in it that you don't really think about halfway through. But you'll figure it out. Good show, though. Very good show.
I'm going to skip a load of news here. I do want to ask this. Dave Meltzer himself actually reported this on May 23rd. AEW Collision in Newark, New Jersey on July 22nd, so this is about a month out from the first episode, has sold 3,500 tickets. Toronto, Ontario, Canada on June 24th has sold around 1,600, so that's in 3 weeks. And AEW Collision's June 29th taping in Hamilton, Ontario has sold less than 600 tickets. Why are they going into Canada filming AEW Collision when they don't even get the show?
They don't get the show
No,
there?
Canada doesn't. UK, there's no deal between Canada and UK and Collision, so we're not getting it so far.
Wait a minute. So AEW, they don't get it in UK?
No, we get Dynamite and Rampage, so do Canada, but there's been no Collision deal made for us or the Canadians. So why they're filming episodes in Canada is a bit of a mystery at this point.
Wait a minute. I might have to put the think tank out on that. I don't know. See, you tell me things that I don't even know. So when I'm talking to you here, I'm talking, I don't know. Hell, I know is the fans know more than I know. I'm just trying to say, I'm trying to set the backstory for it. So I don't know why they're doing that.
We'll leave that for now, then. There's one bit of news that, so for people who know, I wrote a full script of 5 pages like I always do for last week's episode, and we didn't use it, which I'm disappointed by. It was going to be Superstar Billy Graham, but we'll hopefully either get to it or steal questions for it for another time. I'm going to leave the game for now. We can talk about that in a couple of weeks. Hulk Hogan, in an interview with Ariel Helwani, said the following. Shane McMahon called me. He goes, "You got one more in you, old man?" I said, "Take it easy with the old man stuff, brother." I said, "What do you want me to do?" He goes, "All you got to do is stand in the middle of the ring and I'll come to you." And keep in mind, this is Shane McMahon who fell over and tore his quad immediately saying this. Hulk said, "Well, right now, my back needs a little more work, but that's something we can talk about next year." Shane McMahon versus Hulk Hogan for WrestleMania 40. How do you think that will go?
Like shit. Who wants to see that?
Oh,
Nobody.
I do. Come on, you do, and I do. In a perverse sort of sense, maybe.
Yeah. I would like to see him get in the ring, but
who injures themselves first?
It's like seeing Ric Flair's last match. It was horrible. No, I take that back. It wasn't that good. It was worse than horrible. And the Ric Flair, and that's why Rick got so mad at me like 3 months ago when I said that. And he said, "Oh, another old wrestler trying to stay relevant." No, I'm just an old wrestler trying to report it as I see it. I thought he was going to die trying to watch him out there. And to see Shane McMahon and The sun sets on everybody. And it's set on Hulk Hogan. And it's damn sure set on Shane McMahon. Even if he had a sunrise, the sun is still going to set on him, but nobody wants to see it. What they're trying to do is they're trying to angle their way into a spot on WrestleMania so they can get this big payoff. I don't know what the payoff would be. It'd probably be $1 million, $1.5 million, maybe. So, and that is worth advocating for a spot on the card, yes. But as far as fan interest, other than who hurts themselves first, like you suggested, who cares? Because I don't even know what kind of angle they could do to set it up. I mean, they would have to have a reason.
Well, yeah, they've had no relationship with each other on screen for the entirety of the nearly 40 years on and off. I'm sure they were both in the company.
Yeah. And nothing, and it's nothing you can go back to. Hell, Jimmy Hart and Hulk Hogan would mean more. That would actually have better. That would have better work because Jimmy, I don't know how old Jimmy is, but Jimmy is probably close to 80, and he still acts like he's 35, 40.
I'm just looking up. Do you know what? I can't believe it. 79 as of January the 1st. I thought he was 71 or 2. No,
he's older. He's older than I am. How can you be older? How can you be older than water? but he is, and he's still. I mean, he still gets around, and he never had a lot of injuries other than a broken nose that Lawler gave him one time.
Mm-hmm. Jaw, was it jaw? I thought it was jaw.
Who?
I thought it was jaw rather than nose for Jimmy. Or was it nose?
Maybe it was the jaw.
Yeah. Back to Hulk and Shane. I've just written in capital letters, WrestleMania moment. And I think maybe just like, when you used to say, like, I think when someone gets to a certain age, everything becomes a high spot, just like them walking up the stairs now becomes a high spot. Getting into the ring and not like have their head roll off their shoulders as a high spot, that kind of thing. Here's a question for you, right? So Jimmy Valiant, he was wrestling up until 79 or 80, and say wrestling in quotation marks. He was doing a walk and talk match. What's the?
Well, that's what he did for the last 30-something years.
Since, as we say in this country, since God was boy. Yeah, so he was doing that for so long. But if, let's say, Shane and Hulk were to do it, how could they get around it, do a walk and talk match and not rip off the fans, let's say?
It can't be done. I don't think it can be done. Like I said before, what kind of angle are they going to do to set this up? It's got to have a purpose. It has to have a reason for this match to happen. What are they trying to prove? And I don't know. I'd hate to be on this creative team. And Triple H walks in and says, or what if Vince walks in? Come on, guys, think of a goddamn reason, Chad. Mm-hmm. Well, I couldn't do it. I couldn't think of a reason for these two guys to, you might be able to set something up on TV, but a crappy ass reason, but then you got to have the match. You're going through a really damn black spell with trying to come up with a reason. Then you really go through the darkness when they have their match. I would imagine they would cover, if they had that match, it's going to be covered up with everything exciting around it to dampen the lowered expectations of the fans. And then you don't got to give them time to, this is no saying in wrestling, don't give them time to get up and go to the concession stand. Because if you waste too much time, he said, I'm gone. I'm out of here. They'll go to the concession stand and they'll come back and wait for a real match to come on.
I've just come up with an idea. So do you remember a few years ago when, during the COVID times when there was no audience, and then there was that Bray Wyatt John Cena match where like they kept changing outfits to different eras and it made no sense.
Yeah.
We could do Hulk Hogan, but films. So he could be Suburban Commando, an alien from another world. Then he could be Mr. Nanny in the tutu, and then 3 ninjas at Mega Mountain. And then sometimes he can come up with a wig for whatever film that was.
Well, they could do the Undertaker vignettes, the montage that he did with AJ. It took them like 12 hours to film that. Now he could do that, and they could do that, but
Hulk Hogan couldn't act for months. Like he had months on movie sets, and he couldn't act. 12 hours, he'll never get the hang of it.
No, well, he's not an actor. He's got one interview, brother. These pythons, and after a while, he just wore it out. But the thing about Hogan is why he was so over and why Bruno Sammartino was so over is you never saw him on TV wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
And if he did go on TV to wrestle, it was like a Saturday night main event. And then it meant something. And they kept them off TV. So if you wanted to see them, you have to go buy a ticket. You had to go to the arena to buy the ticket.
With the there's so much stuff I want to get to here. What would you prefer? Would you prefer to talk about?
If you would shut me up long enough, you could get to it.
Oh God, no, I'm too polite, for God's sake. I'd never interrupt you, apart from the times I do. We can either talk about Bray Wyatt, we can talk about Karrion Kross, or we can talk about Luigi Primo, the wrestling pizza guy.
Let's talk about the first two.
Okay, then we'll have to do maybe slightly condensed because we've got a ton of questions with Chris and Tammy to come up as well. But there is. Bray Wyatt's absence is now further cemented as a recent internal roster document omitted Bray entirely. He's not been fired, but it just seems that he's not coming back anytime soon. So we've covered why Bray's return simply didn't work. It was a good series of return vignettes, but then just months of nothing that led nowhere. And then an Uncle Howdy character that started off fun and then went nowhere. One televised match in 6 months, then Bray went nowhere and disappears, and Howdy gets killed, and then no mention of either. Anyway, fightfans.co.uk says that there were creative differences after the Royal Rumble pitch black match. Now, this is the one from the darkened... They had, like, Dayglow kendo sticks, and I actually watched that, and that was pretty... It's sponsored by Mountain Dew. I know that.
That was with LA Knight.
That was with LA Knight, indeed. WWE wanted the Fiend character to return, supposedly. Now, keep in mind that the Fiend... In fact, let's just go with creative, and maybe that's where the issues stem from, is creative differences after the Royal Rumble match.
First of all, I've said a long time ago that Bray Wyatt, even when he did those long 2-minute, 3-minute interviews, as soon as he got finished, during doing the interview, you'd look at your friend sitting there with you or whoever was with you and say, what did he say? Because you don't remember anything he said of substance. It was just he was doing, I guess, this stuff that was in the back of Bray's head that didn't make any sense except to Bray. Then when they got the Fiend, here's the Fiend now. Who could beat him?
Nobody, pretty much.
Nobody. Nobody could beat him.
Well, it wasn't that no one could beat him. It's that no one could even, like, he wouldn't even register any offensive moves. So,
well, that is not the name of the game. Why did a lot of heels all of a sudden they was beating the crap out of somebody, and when the babyface got the upper hand, he said, "Whoa!" He starts begging off because that's what the fans wanted. They wanted to see him, the heel, get his ass handed to him. But Fiend, I don't even know if he was a heel or a babyface, as according to what his opponent was, I guess. But I never saw the purpose of him. He never drew any money. Now, he may sell some merchandise, but if he's just going to sell merchandise, just keep him down on your card and don't try to push him into your main event, because I don't think he's going to sell any tickets.
Do you know how much his contract was worth before he got fired the first time?
I heard $4 million.
$4 million a year.
You believe that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Brock
Why do you?
supposedly on 12, Roman some years ago was on 8 before he went part-time. So WWE's definitely giving out some
Wait a
serious
minute.
money.
$8 million on a part-time contract.
No, this was before Roman went part-time. He was on 8 million a year. But Brock is part-time and he's making 12 at least. There's not been any fresh new numbers come out recently.
Well, I don't see Brock worth $12 million either. I really don't. And if Bray Wyatt was worth $4 million, I can understand him wanting the job back. But this is what I think happened to Bray. I think he wants to be a writer. He wants to be a creator so badly that I think they gave him, what's that word? Carte blanche, or
that's it.
That he had full control over it. And he had a special writer. And I know him. He wrote, I don't know if he wrote for me or me and Brad, and John.
Jack
Hager. Jack Swagger.
We'll get there.
They changed their name so much. But I know the guy. And I understand that when they got rid of him for some kind of differences, I think, is Bray got pissed off, and I guess maybe said, I'll quit or I'll do this. Well, they called his bluff, I think, and they told him to go home. Now, I don't know how this affects his contract. I'm surely he's not going to get $4 million a year to sit at home.
No, it'll be frozen.
They're not going to do that. So, and all the ideas that Bray pitched and the writer pitched, the writer wasn't even a wrestling guy. Writers in WWF, they want them to have zero exposure to wrestling. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
They don't want them to have any preconceived notions about wrestling. They want them to have actually none. I don't know. That's not, of course, that's not possible. But they don't want them to say this is in the wrestling. They don't want them to have any exposure to wrestling as far as writing it.
That's just like a Kevin Dunn thing, isn't it? Because he just seems so embarrassed of what business he's in. He wants to win, Emmys for television writing and stuff like that. I mean, I don't understand why Vince McMahon and Kevin Dunn seem to be in the wrestling business, yet they just can't seem to bring themselves to admit it.
The thing about if you used to admit that you were in wrestling, because it was such I'm looking for the word here. It was like the lowest hanging fruit or something. It was like the way they used to treat it. It was like,
was it the bastard child of show business, something like that?
It was flea market wrestling, but still, I've seen some of those little flea markets turn out some hell of a stories. Now, you might only have 300 people watching the story, but the people that were watching the story were well versed in it, and they responded when they needed to. But going back to Bray, I think that what has happened to him, it just didn't get over, period. Because I don't think he even understands the wrestling business himself. When the Wyatt family used to go out and do this long, detailed, drawn-out interview, he never really acknowledged the rest of them, really, I don't think. I don't even know what he talked about, really.
Name one quote he ever did.
I don't remember one.
Did he ever have a catchphrase?
No. I don't know.
He must have done at one point, but it was 10 years ago. I can't remember. Anyway, do you suspect to be back soon? Anyway, actually, something else I want to bring up. I want to correct myself slightly. The Pitch Black match was the only match Bray Wyatt had on television that you could see. All the few others were house shows. There's other rumours that he's just depression or injury. How he got injured, he barely wrestled. But
hey, he was walking down the ramp and stumbled. because that is a prevalent injury in wrestling.
He could have been hanging around with Shane McMahon.
He could have.
I'll tell you what, right? Of all the Triple H hirings, so this is actually going to lead to Karrion Kross. So we've got Bray, Karrion Kross, the Good Brothers, Braun Strowman, who's also now injured, Johnny Gargano, Dexter Lumis. They were all brought back after they were fired in like 2021, 2022. None of them really seems to have done much since their return. And
much
of anything.
They've done nothing. But the best part of that group, the best one that they can do something with is Lumis. Because Lumis, I had him in TNA for a while, and he reminded me of almost a little bit of a Stone Cold, a little bit, because he had that same vibe that LA Knight does now. He just didn't talk a lot. And they could take that and do something with it. Because how can you get a guy over that never talks? All he said that I ever heard him say was, "I do," when he was getting married. But he has a lot of potential, I think, if they just handle him right.
It's the mustache, isn't it? You always appreciate another man with a mustache.
Yes, I do.
I wanted to ask you about Karrion Kross. A couple of weeks ago, you made mention, not with us, elsewhere, Sportskeeda. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to watch some Karrion Kross matches. I watched a few. Nothing wrong with him. There was nothing wrong with him. He's got a good size to him. He looks fine in trunks. And then his interviews, they're cliche and cheesy. They are double cheddar Stilton cheesy. It's like you can almost see, like, say
it, James.
They are.
They're the shits.
Do you know, he says them nicely enough, but the fact is, you can almost see the cue cards behind the camera, and then it's intercut with like really, really like Getty images, stock footage of like cards burning or something like that, and like tarot cards. Anyway,
it's horrible. They couldn't get him over. I mean, they couldn't get heat on him if they doused him with a gallon of gasoline and threw a match on him. They couldn't get heat on him because he's that type. He's got a gimmick, and he's been there a couple of times, right? And they've tried different gimmicks on him. He's just not going to make it. The girl has more heat and attention that he has, and they put him on TV. This is when I decided they're done with him. They beat him the last couple of times on TV. So when they beat you on TV after you've been pushed, that means that push is over, and you go to the back of the line and wait for your contracts up, because there's nothing they can do with him. I don't like the gimmick. He tries to be too gimmicky. And
forced gimmickry. It seems like I must have a character, but you can tell he doesn't believe in it. He just seems like a dude in the bar that all of a sudden believes in burning tarot cards and fortune and stuff.
And that comes from creative. They had no other better idea than to go and give him all these gimmicks, and give him a girl, and then have them pop up on TV, and all of a sudden you got the girl right into the camera, and then they come up a little bit, and there he is. Oh, where'd he come from? Oh, I predicted this also. The maximum male models, they would bomb. They bombed. I predicted Karrion Kross would bomb. He bombed. I predicted Braun Strowman that he would bomb. He's bombed. And everybody you named has bombed. Johnny, Gargano?
Gargano, yeah. I think
Gargano.
When Vince came back, all of a sudden the digs that he was a comic book geek and that kind of thing started coming back in. So it's like, you're paying this guy to crap all over him, and to make him seem less cool as... Well,
I remember meeting him one time. I was on a show somewhere. That's what you get with wrestlers. I was on this show somewhere. Where was it? I don't remember now. Because you don't remember. I've seen 1,000 1,000 or more locker rooms. And I cannot remember where I saw him. It was somewhere in Ohio, I think. And I think he was going to NXT and he was going over his match, and nice guy. He was very, very friendly. I mean, there was no reason for him to be unfriendly, is what I'm saying. And he was kind of short. He was like, I'm not real tall, but I'm like 5'10". I used to be 5'11" before they beat the crap out of me and made me shorter. But he's like 5'8". And in the land of giants, I mean, look how much trouble that, what was his name? The guy they put on the champion finally, short guy, little guy.
Which champion?
The world title.
Seth Rollins, didn't they?
No. No, he's in AEW now.
No, not Daniel Bryan.
Daniel Bryan.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. He was in a land of giants, and look how hard he had to work.
Yeah, but he was great.
But he was great. He really was. But look, that's what a first glance at somebody can do, that if they don't look big and tough and that they can do it. But he had to work harder to get to the same spot. Everybody else just got there by being big.
I want to bring up something. I'm going to be kind here. Karrion Kross, I think, could do a lot better if they ditched the sort of silly, forced, gimmickry, mystical darkness kind of thing that The Undertaker can get away with. Hey, Bray Wyatt can get away with it. And what if they just had him on his own, just being a mean dude, and then work from there?
Well, he's got a story.
I think taking the story away from him might help at this point. Just have no story and just be. Anyway, I was just looking at here. Shinsuke Nakamura, he lost to AJ Styles. He lost to in May.
Mm-hmm. And
then he didn't have. Then he didn't have a match until March. So they're not even featuring him very much on SmackDown.
Nakamura.
Sorry, Karrion Kross.
Oh yeah, Karrion Kross. He's not going to get over. Accept your losses and move on. Because every time they give a match to him, they're actually cheating the rest of the roster out of a chance to get over. And I think when you're in a position with Karrion Kross, can you imagine going in the writer's room and sitting down and they said, what are we talking about today? Oh, Karrion Kross. Oh, fuck God. Oh, no. Because they're burnt. I mean, when the writers get burnt, and see, I think that's what happened to Bray. They got burnt out on Bray early too, but then he started throwing his own stuff in there. Oh yeah, over there. And Vince wanted to go with him. So you remember the time, but you may not remember it. I come back from my injury, which is a broken leg. And all of a sudden, we're in San Francisco. I mean, we was in L.A., SummerSlam, I guess. I don't know what it was. And it was John Cena issuing challenge to anybody. You remember that? All of a sudden, I step out. I'm in a wheelchair. And I go out and I says, I got somebody for you. And they hadn't seen me in 6 months. And everybody expected Jack Swagger to come out with me. But I came out with Del Rio. And I'm thinking, and that was Vince's idea. He said, oh, everybody, I wonder, why you're with Del Rio. And I said, well, if that everybody is wondering, I'm wondering too. Why in the hell am I with this guy? Because I couldn't stand him before. And I may have covered this on this show, but I gave them a good reason to get out of it, is we set him up. But he didn't want to do it. And all of a sudden, I'm gone.
What did Alberto think about all that? Was he the same as you? Just like, why are we together?
Well, he did, but he didn't. See, you can run a course of action in WWE and kind of knowing too much, which works to your disadvantage. Because if you took this up to Vince, he'd want you to make it work. But there was no way to make it work in that unless you had somewhere to go to. See, it was conceived with no idea or no destination in mind. See, after about 2 weeks, I was telling the agents, guys, we need to do something. And I had the idea of me going out there and Del Rio, Swagger knocking my crutches out and, and I'm getting back up and all of a sudden Swagger comes to defend me. Del Rio knocks him out. And then Del Rio tells him, hey, you want to do something about him once you get down here. And then when he comes down, they get to fighting. I take my crutch and I just busted over Del Rio's head. Now it becomes apparent that I laid awake at night. All these lonely nights and nobody called me. Nobody give a shit about Zeb Coulter. I was like, I'm the horse that broke his leg. Oh, shoot the horse. And I laid awake at night thinking about how to get back at Del Rio. And I did. And so we lay him up. Now that was a good angle, I thought. Made sense. And anybody who can lay up in a hospital bed and think of how to get back at somebody is a pretty devious bastard. Mm. And there was a long way to go with that. But Road Dogg told me one time, he said, Vince come in the room, he said, all right, anybody got any ideas about Zeb? And nobody, they all went like this, like, nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. And it was Vince's idea. So you couldn't say this is the shits, Vince. You couldn't tell him that. And finally Vince says, well, nobody has any ideas on it. And hey, he's not going to waste too much sleep on it. Like, I was just a guy. And Del Rio's a guy and Swagger was a guy. So it didn't matter. So nobody had any ideas, so they dropped it.
We are going to move on to the main event, as it were, of our podcast. I think that might actually be one of my catchphrases. I've just caught myself saying it, and I'm sure I say that every single time now.
You know something? You need to have a little music here. Like, now it's the main event, like Mark Henry does on the AEW.
My guitar's there somewhere. I can't see it.
Well, not that. It's got to be pre-recorded. And then they said, oh, this is what we tuned in for. Okay.
The main event of the evening. The main event of the podcast is going to be Chris and Tammy. So you watched some of it. I watched all of it this morning. Finally found a copy I could watch. Tammy and Chris, Dark Side of the Ring. It's the first episode of Series 4. And I've written a ton of notes. We'll get through as many as we can in the next, hour maybe, of whatever we've got left in the podcast time. And here's what I've written first. Chris's first territory of any note was actually first in USWA in 1991. This was not in the documentary. It sort of made it seem like it was Smoky Mountain, but that was in 92. He also was in FMW, that Japanese hardcore place, like Sabu and loads of other of the guys, of the hardcore wrestlers made their names. Including, actually, this is something else, USWA based, is Chris Candido. Mostly wrestled Danny Davis and Doug Gilbert, two names we'll get to at another episode, I'm sure, before hitting SMW in 1992, and he even wrestled Taz in an early match. Do you remember Taz being in Smoky Mountain very briefly?
Yes, I do.
Why didn't you stay longer? Was it just not a good fit, or?
I don't know. I remember we ran Knoxville one day, and he was in the back. I don't even remember him at TV. So I don't know. Those things, they were out of my area of expertise, so I don't know.
Cornette has said in the past that Chris had tried some sort of high-flying, something that Gordon Soley would struggle to call, and the entire audience, the entire crowd just cuts a great big wet fart on it, because they didn't even know what they were seeing. And then someone pulls, I can't remember the full stories off the top of my head, someone pulls Chris aside and said, listen, instead of doing this like double flying Watcher Moojar, Why don't you get annoyed? Right.
What was that word?
And why don't you like get all like wound up and frustrated and then kick the stairs on the ringside and then sell your foot? And then he did that, and then the crowd went, "Wow!" Got a huge reaction. I think that's a great lesson for people to learn, aspiring wrestlers or wrestlers out there to learn, is that every crowd is different, every territory is different, and what works one place may not work in the other place.
Well, every wrestler that goes out there, he has to feel the temperature of the room. It's like a comic. You got to feel the temperature, and you got to, if they're buying this, give them that. If they're buying something else, give them that. MVP, you know who I'm talking about. Yeah. I brought him to Puerto Rico. Well, I didn't bring him. Luke brought him. He went out one night and he had this wrestling match. It's like crickets. Nothing. So he come back. I said, brother, you got to stop that wrestling. He said, yeah, but that's what we're supposed to do. I said, no, not in Puerto Rico. If you don't give them something that they can dislike right off the bat, this wrestling is not going to do it. They're not big perceivers of technical wrestling. So stop it. So he stopped it. He got better, but it was painful to watch. So I told him to stop it.
What did you tell him specifically to do? Just punch kick?
Yeah, I said that. Show some personality. Show me that. I don't care. There's different ways to do it. You show me your way. And I'm watching it. So if you do something that I like and the fans like, it may benefit you in the long run to do that kind of stuff. I want you to get a rise out of those people out there, because people just don't get up or yell for no reason. You got to give them an incentive to do that. And that's what I think a lot of bookers don't do. I mean, somebody asked me one day, they said, what's it take to be a booker? And I said, well, anybody can be a booker. I said, you could be a booker. Just go and say, here's the card. Come up with what you want to do. So therefore, that means you're the booker. So tell me what you want to do, and we'll do it. And you can, but the secret is to be a successful booker, which is a little bit harder. But see, most of the guys who drew a lot of money, all these bookers that drew all this money, they had the idea, but they didn't have the format of the match these guys were going to have. Then they would get them in the back and said, this is what I want to do, blah, blah, blah. We want to end up here. So you guys take this, put it together, and then the match starts here, and the match flows down through here. You get over here, and then we're going to piece it all together. I mean, it sounds a little more difficult than what it is. But once you tell guys where you want to go, if you kind of involve them in the process, they'll get you there. I mean, most experienced guys will anyway.
Did you ever work with MVP anywhere else? Or was it just Puerto Rico? Because he went to WWE, he had tons of personality, so he obviously learned something from you.
They told him the same thing, probably. Because he was just starting when I booked him. And I don't know where Luke found him. I really don't. I guess he called Luke, and he got booked down there. I didn't know the guy. And when I came in, he said, oh yeah, mate, matey, I booked this guy. I forgot his name. His name wasn't there. I forgot even what his name was then. And I met him the night of the show. We went somewhere, and he went out there, and I watched him. I wanted to see. He didn't stay long. He stayed like a month.
Gonna bug me now. I've got to find out. Antonio Banks?
Maybe.
Could have been that. Anyway.
I think it was that.
We'll leave him there. I've just got to ask you this as well, just before we get into the meat of the documentary. Memories of Boo Bradley, a.k.a. Balls Mahoney, a.k.a. for a very brief period, Santa Claus, the evil Father Christmas, Father Santa Claus that lasted, unsurprisingly, the month of December. And then the characters sort of lost interest in January.
Mm-hmm. I had him in Puerto Rico, too.
Oh, did you really?
He was, and read those names, I think he wouldn't Boo Bradley. He
would have been Balls later on.
Balls Mahoney. So I remember talking to him one night. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. We were sitting outside drinking, and I was talking to him. He was talking back and forth. And I mentioned to him that who were the two guys in ECW? They were a tag team, and one of them died. I don't know.
When? What?
When
during ECW? Public Enemy?
During Public Enemy.
Definitely Public Enemy, because I was going to say the Eliminator, not the Eliminators, although one of those did die.
It was
the Pitbulls.
Public Enemy.
It was Public Enemy.
The Pitbulls.
Yeah, they wore the leather one piece.
Well, I may have this wrong, but okay. It doesn't really matter about the story. But we were talking, and he said one of the I think he mentioned the Public Enemy guys, and I went, the one that died, and he went, what?
Oh no!
And I went, I didn't know what to say, because they were all from the Northeast up there. I thought they were all friends, and if one of them had died, surely Balls would have known. And he says, "You're kidding me, right?" I went, "No." And he got up, and this really bothered me. He started crying. And he got up and he said, I gotta go. And he left. And I think he went home early the next morning. So, it's hard to break news to somebody that you think they already know, but he didn't. But Balls, he was good, and he was different. And he got over in Puerto Rico. It was his style. People liked him. And I think he'd have done well there had he stayed. So, but I never will forget that, how it shocked him. He started crying. Hell, I almost started crying because I didn't know what I thought he knew, but he didn't. So that's like one of those things that. Hang on a minute.
What's that? Dog was barking there, but we pretty much ended. I was going to say, because you had the Pitbulls in IWA in 2002, Gary Wolf and Anthony Durante, and I think Anthony died the year after. But you did have the Pitbulls in 2002
in Puerto Rico.
Yep, IWA.
I didn't book them either.
Oh, okay then. We'll move on. Tammy started in the business, obviously as Chris's girlfriend, Chris's girlfriend, and then Cornette started giving her jobs to justify paying her a little bit, like a photographer or whatever else it was. And then Jim says, "Hey, why don't you try and be a manager?" And she does one take as Tammy Sytch, the Hillary Clinton sort of disciple of the early 90s, with the pantsuit, that kind of thing. And how? Talk to me about the very first time you met Tammy.
Well, I met her in Smoky Mountain, and she was very, very, very friendly. She didn't come up to me and speak to me. I went up to her because she was I knew she would be so green. She wouldn't know the protocol. Not that she was like snubbing anybody. But I went up and introduced myself and to Chris. They were very friendly, and of course they knew who I was. But I don't think Tammy was the fan that Chris was. Chris was the fan between the two of them. So when she got an opportunity to shine, because she was a good-looking girl, young. She was about 19.
Mm-hmm.
And when he put her out there, she was the antithesis, I like that word, of a lot of managers, because they're usually male and, kind of older, but she was young, a good-looking girl, and she got over.
She wasn't a valet. She wasn't a valet. She was a manager, and I think that's why I'm chewing on a sweet here. I think that's an important distinction, is that she was she played a bigger part than just looking pretty.
Yeah, she did interviews, and I used to do a deal on Smoky Mountain. It was called Down and Dirty with Dutch. Mm-hmm. And we had Tammy on there one day, and she came in there and she was ranting and raving about this dirty white girl. And the dirty white girl wasn't a wrestler. But the dirty white girl brought another girl with her. I forgot her name. Big old rugged looking girl. And they got into it, and I've tried to break it up. I never will forget this. And the girl, that dirty white girl had brought, she gave me a slam. And I laid there and I took the mic. I said, "Oh, it's broken down here. We got to go." And we got out of the segment, which was actually a good time to get out of it. But Peggy Lee Leather, I think that's who she's called.
Yes, I know that name. Yeah.
And she was good. She was really good, Smoky Mountain.
Right, so there's Andy Kaufman. We mentioned Andy Kaufman, or you mentioned Andy Kaufman before. Inspired vignettes from, I think she had some middle-aged lady, maybe not quite as attractive as Tammy, and talking down to her about beauty tips and how to use, I don't know, eyeliner or whatever. And then at one point in one of the vignettes, she kicks her down like a golf course, something like that. Do you remember any of these vignettes?
I remember them. I don't remember them specifically because I was on commentary during that time, and a lot of times they wouldn't show it in the house because they didn't have a big screen in some of those damn the end of the world gyms. I said the reason that West Virginia is so secluded is nobody can find it. You start out in a town, and hell, you look on a map, you don't even know where in the hell you are, and you got a map. Now they have GPS, but you could get lost going in some of those turns in those mountains. Some of those turns would go like this. They would go here, and they go up, and they turn around, and they just work their way around the mountain. It would take you you'd be going 40 miles an hour, and it would take you an hour and a half to go 40 miles. It was, and the reason nobody got out was nobody could read a map coming out either. So you got lost on the way out. Not really, but it was really some of those towns up there were really secluded. So when a wrestling show came to the town, that's the biggest form of outside entertainment they've had in the town in 10, 15 years. And all the people would come to it just to get out to see something.
Is it true that some of the fans, when you went to some more of the more backwater areas, would turn up on donkeys?
No.
Someone has said that once, that a fan turned up on a donkey.
I said that one time, and it was true that I was looking out a window one day, and it was a town that one of the Fullers, Ron Fuller, had booked. And I just happened to look out the window, and here come a guy across this little walk bridge, and he's on a donkey. And I said, "What the hell are we doing?" And then I was watching. Now the donkey goes back by itself across the walk bridge. And I went, what did a donkey get loose? Because nobody was with the donkey. And then about 5-10 minutes later, I'm seeing the donkey come back across, and it had a woman on it. Because what the guy had done, he come across, and he sent the donkey back, this trained donkey, I guess, and he came back with his wife or his girlfriend or somebody, and he brought her across. I've seen everything now. I mean, you delivered specifically by donkey to the front door. And everybody knew in those little towns, everybody knows. I mean, you couldn't steal that donkey if you wanted to because everybody knew it was somebody's donkey. Everybody knew it. So if you tried to steal it, somebody would stooge you off and he said, "Oh, Bill got the donkey." And God, he would go down there, and if his donkey was stolen, he'd know exactly who got it.
You know, I wish we had 4 hours for this podcast. I really do. I really do. I'm going to have to do the quick version of it. WWF hires Chris and Tammy in the spring of 1995. The original character for Chris was Mighty Mouse because he was like 5'8". And Vince McMahon in the mid-90s was, to him, disgustingly short. That, like, how dare someone even 5'8" get on, TV? He had Owen Hart, and that was like the shortest person on the roster. Where am I looking? After being the fitness guru for a few months, that was his character, and then he did the thing with Barry Horowitz. Chris is then put into a tag team with Dr. Tom Pritchard, who was rechristened Zip, and he had his hair buzzed, which he really hated, and dyed blonde. Anyway, do you know what? Let's talk about Dr. Tom and having to shave his head. Did he ever talk to you about this and just how gutted he was he had to?
But he was physically, he was just beside himself. He hated it. He didn't hide it. Tom was always kind of proud of his hair, and he'd fluff it out and all the time. And so for him to cut his hair for a job, and he didn't even like who he was working with. He didn't really care for that. So he just got him a spot on the card. That's all he wanted anyway. I'm sure that he would have wanted a much higher spot, but he didn't get it. And I think Tom did tell me, I heard him do an interview, said it was the most disgusting part of his wrestling career. It was horrible. His most horrible time he's ever had in the wrestling business.
Why did Tom and Tammy not get along?
Because Tammy's a bitch. Exactly. Man, Tom, well, Tom.
Oh, yeah.
Tom's laid back and whatever. Easy to get along with, He wouldn't say boo to a goose. Is that the word you used?
It was, yeah.
He wouldn't say boo to a goose. And Tom, I've never met anybody who didn't like Tom because there was nothing to get upset about. If you was going down the road and you said, "Hey, you mind if I do this and smoke some crack?" No, man, go ahead. And the guy could be driving. "Oh, go ahead, Or what about this? Oh, and yeah, go ahead. Hey, I'm going to stop down there to 7-Eleven, rob it. You mind? No, go ahead, man. But he didn't. He was very agreeable to most everything. Hey, let's stop and eat. Okay, let's go. It's whatever you wanted to do. He was never assertive. And he may have wanted to eat other places, but he didn't really care. But Tammy is a bitch in her own right. And after she got a little bit ingrained into her role in WWE, and now what ruined Tammy in WWE was Vince himself. He loved her. And he would take, I could see him out there one day, and I never saw Vince on the floor with anybody, but he was out there personally managing her, where she had to come down the ramp and where the camera was going to be and where she was going to be and what she had to do here and here. He personally managed that. And he kept that up for a couple of weeks, and they was going with her and, the Body Donnas and, Chris and Tom and her. But it went to her head because she began to think that she was more important than what she really was. So as we've seen where that has gotten her, of course, the last time we heard about Tammy was she hit that guy in the rear and killed him. Mm-hmm. And I think she should go to jail for that because you just can't kill a guy and get off. She's had like 7 suspensions of her license. But But that's neither here nor there now. That's coming up.
Well, let me ask you this then. As you say, Timmy, God, me and my names today. Tammy Sytch becomes a nightmare to deal with. The whole WWF stardom thing goes to a head, and she's still very, very young in the business, of course. So she's in her early 20s still, not dealing with fame maybe as well as she could have done. But just to like the wrestler in the locker room or just people in general, how did she change? Did she behave differently towards them, or did she just start ignoring people and thinking she was too good for them, or how did that manifest?
I think what I call high-hatted people. She did the hi-hat, like I don't want to talk to you if you're too low, and I think a lot of people backstage it's its own universe kind of to speak, because that's your world. It's very small. It was then, not as big as it is now. But people caught on to that, especially the other girls in WWF. They caught on it too real quick. And the girls did not like her. She did not like them, because you see that with a lot of girls anyway. I mean, that's their natural habitat. But the girls in WWE, they didn't much appreciate it. And there were some of them that couldn't stand her, some of them that tolerated her. And I don't know, I don't think she had any friends backstage at WWE. Not that I heard, not that I saw. Maybe that hairdresser, that Tammy, what's her name? I mean, that Terry Boulder, Terry who?
The hairdresser?
Dustin married her.
Terry Runnels.
Terry Runnels. She may have been a little bit of a friend, but only when she was doing her hair, kind of, to speak. But no, she didn't have any allies other than Vince. Even the agents didn't like to deal with her, because Vince had a vested interest in her well-being, her getting over. So when you took an agent over there to Tammy, if she suggested something which she was not qualified to do, the agent, because he was fearing that she may go back to Vince and put in a Yelp review on him in person, so they would let her get by with it. So
there's a very famous incident. So it only become famous years after the fact, of course. That one, I think this is the Body Donnas and Sonny, and they're feuding or arguing or battling with the Godwins. Now, the Godwins at the time were very famous for carrying around a slop bucket. And one day, Henry, do you know the story? Were you there? You might as well tell the entire story if you know it.
Well, they were going to slop her with their slop bucket, because that would be the most humiliating thing they could do to Tammy or to anybody in that regard, to hit you with a slop bucket. Can you imagine what's in a slop bucket? Anything. So the story was, I think Henry, they had a slop bucket over in the corner, and he says, guys, I'm going to dump this on Tammy's head out there, so nobody put nothing in it that shouldn't be there, okay? Well, you can imagine what went in there. So, and then he went out there and dumped it on her. I don't think she knew it. I think somebody may have told her later. But, and that's sometimes guys that do that to people, I would never do something like that to anybody. First of all, I don't have the guts to do it. And I don't think it's not the right thing to do, I don't think, but they did it anyway.
So you weren't in line. You weren't in line to contribute to the slot bucket's contents this day. Was it like a Superstars taping or something, I think?
Well, I don't know what taping it was, but I was there and I remember it. But I didn't hear that part of it till later, because it was just a slop bucket to me. I mean, how much can you imagine that was in a slop bucket anyway? that could be any worse than what's already in it.
Let me tell you, right? So when Henry Godwin would do on a bad guy, whether he was a bad guy or a good guy, because he switched about, dump the bucket on somebody that I presume he liked. When the contents would sort of drop like from the bucket from their head, it'd be like apple peel, bit of paper, something really innocuous. When the slot bucket's dumped on Sonny, it's like porridge mixed with piss. It's it's so gross. It's way worse than every other one. If you see some other sloppings, then you can tell the difference.
You're gonna have to put up a censor on this. You really are.
Oh, like with Kenny Bolin.
Yeah, some of the content is not usable, not safe for work. You got to put this up there. And it's not because we're cussing or doing anything, but we have to. I think you should warn the people that are going to listen to this what they might be hearing.
Warning, like a story about like a big bucket of piss porridge.
Well, listen, if I'm listening to a podcast and somebody warns me, hey, now some of this may be objectionable to certain fans, be warned. Mm-hmm. Well, you warned me.
We did that. We did that for Kenny Bolin, and Kenny on his channel, he stole exactly my line. Say stole, but he paid tribute to exactly my line, because when I said, warning, this podcast contains a dangerous amount of Kenny Bolin, and then naughty words, whatever. And then for a video that he did in response to a story that Damien Sandow said on our, the funeral story, when he went to the funeral. Yeah. And Kenny Bolin said, whoa, hang on, that's not exactly what happened. And then Kenny retells the story almost verbatim what Damien Sandow said as well.
Well, I actually thought I had it in my head that he came up with it, but we did it here. Because I think this podcast is kind of known that we don't cuss a lot, I mean, I couldn't be like Cornette. I mean, that takes a lot of energy to say a cuss word every 5 words. And that's not him going full tilt boogie either.
Special occasions, we do some swearing, I think.
Oh, yeah.
You wanted to make mention, I think this sort of goes well with the rest of what we're talking about, Tammy, at this point. The European tour on the bus. Now, I'm sort of going to give away the punchline here, because we have covered it to a point before where someone leaves a little old stinky pickle in Sonny's lunch, and then they find it. Anyway, that's sort of like the punchline, but what had she done to draw the ire of whoever it was for it to end up in that conclusion?
The backstory.
The backstory on the bus. It was 95 and 96.
No, I think it was, you're right. It was 95, 96. Yes, it was. What had been going on is Tammy and Chris were both politicking to join the clique. And the clique being Nash and Hall and 1-2-3 Kid and Triple H and, Shawn Michaels, and they wanted to be accepted amongst those types. So we got on the bus, and the bus was segregated because the clique sat in the back of the bus in their little space, and what separated us was like a toilet, like a middle of the bus. You could get up and go to the restroom, and then we would sit in kind of the front of the bus. The renegades, we weren't accepted with the clique in the back, and I didn't want to go back there anyway. And I was up there with Bradshaw and Savio. Kane was up there. Al Snow was up there. So a bunch of us that they didn't want back there was up with us, plus Tammy and Chris. And it was common knowledge that they were trying to work their way to the back. and it was about a 3-week run. So about the first week went by, and every now and then we'd see Tammy go to the back and she'd come back. Okay. And finally, one day we got on there. It's about the second week. And we got on there one day, and Tammy and Chris went right to the back. So that signified to us, me and Bradshaw and Savio and Kane, Al Snow, we were the rejects. But it signified to us that finally they have been accepted into the clique, which was actually, politically speaking, a big jump for them. Because now they're right in there with Vince, and Vince liked them. And that lasted about 2 days. Because the next day was okay. I think the next day was okay. But when we got on the bus to go on the third day after they joined, apparently something had happened that had upset the balance of the clique. Mm-hmm. And we've just talked about that. It was the little pickle that was in Tammy's food. And she went back and she looked in her food and she saw that little pickle that shouldn't have been there. And I think the people know what the pickle is that I'm talking about. And she got on the phone to Lisa, what was her name you said?
Wolf.
Lisa Wolf. And she was raising hell because this actually, could be a legal issue with WWE. And if she wanted it to be, so Lisa Wolf was trying to tone that down. And Tammy left that day. As soon as they found it, and she found it at about probably 12 o'clock at night. And she called the States at 12 o'clock, which was about, I guess, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning in Stanford time. And they had her on a plane about 7 o'clock the next morning out of London, I guess. And she flew back. And, when I'm thinking about this, somebody says, oh, a lot of people didn't like it because it is gross. I mean, it's terribly gross. And it is actually kind of embarrassing for me to be a member of the wrestling fraternity. And we had grown men that's making $1 million, $2 million a year. And they're acting like 16-year-old kids in a backyard party. And I'm thinking, damn, it was embarrassing to me to know that goes on. This was where Vince should have kind of cracked down on it, but he didn't. He didn't crack down on it at all. And when nothing was said, nothing was done, that told the clique that, they had full clearance now to do whatever they wanted to do. And it could be Vince wouldn't care. Vince didn't care until they did the group hug.
Mm-hmm. And then they were going anyway.
And they were going anyway. And that pissed off Vince because he couldn't do anything to Hall and Nash because they were already going, couldn't do anything to Shawn because he was a champion. The only ones he could do anything to was Triple H. And he punished him for 6 months, especially with Jake and that snake. But I will say one thing with Triple H. He never bitched about it, never said one word about it. He went and he did everything that was asked of him. When he was laying there one night and that big snake was slithering across him, I said, F this. I don't give a shit what I'd done. I'd getting out of that ring. That's cruel and inhumane punishment. I think the Supreme Court would back you up on that.
Oh, no, you need to have a snake on you. You need to hold a snake. It's good for the soul.
Oh, my God. I hate snakes.
I know you hate snakes. We'll move off the snake thing. I'm going to ask you a few more questions. We'll wrap it up. Shawn Michaels and Tammy Sytch. When was the first time in the locker room? I'm presuming you heard it, the rumours floating around in the locker room. So what was going around when you first heard about this, and maybe even who told you?
I don't remember who told me, but everybody else knew it. I don't know why Chris wouldn't have known it, which brings up another question. If he did know it, did he care? Maybe his possible landing zone trumped what was going on to get him there. So, and yeah, Tammy she was a little sluttish. I mean, she was beginning down that route, but it's hard to see a little girl, 18, 19 years old, pretty girl, get abused. And I won't say get abused willingly abused, I would think, because she went along with it. And a lot of times she probably instigated it. And I mean, when he would go to the ring or she wasn't needed, or she would go and have a little dalliance with somebody else in the back. I've always thought that Chris knew it, but never let on that he knew it. I think even his brother had said that.
It definitely bothered him. As far as I know, it really bothered Chris. But yeah, as you said, he wouldn't really let on for the sake of the relationship.
For the sake of his relationship with her?
Yes.
Or the relationship with him in WWE or F?
Well, I think this was going on in ECW. This had been going... It wasn't like exclusive WWF. I'll give you a couple more. This is from Tammy herself. She said that she had also had a brief dalliance with Davey Boy Smith. And in the Brian Pillman book, Crazy Like a Fox, I think Mark Madden gives the story that he was on the phone with Brian and Tammy... Brian Pillman and Tammy Sytch while they were at it, and they were both saying something like, "Oh my god, I can't believe we're doing this," while doing that at the same time. Unbelievable. And there's so many other rumors going out there that obviously Tammy disagrees with.
Smoky Mountain too.
Yeah.
So, but I won't say who it was in Smoky Mountain because these guys are married, so I don't want to upset that cart. See, that's one thing. When I wrote a book, I wrote it in such a way that I didn't really identify the people so much, because my job is to tell a story. It's not to out anybody. I didn't say anybody was gay. I didn't say anybody was this. Anybody was a drunk. Anybody was a drug addict. Because it's none of my business. I don't think it's any of my the readers. I don't think it's their business either. But I think it works just as good if you just don't name them, because they're not being charged with anything, and it's just backstage politics. But I don't know.
Is it
Tammy was a piece of crap, believe me.
Is it fair to say that Tammy would be extra nice to people who she thought could advance her career in some way?
You think? Yeah, I would think that she is, and young girls learn this early. They know if their careers or whatever they wanted to do could be enhanced by a guy if they acted a certain way. Yeah, she knew exactly what she was doing.
I might just say this and then move on to another question. Obviously, part of the dark side of the ring is talking about Chris ending up falling into a painkiller addiction after breaking his neck in the WWF in Madison Square Garden. Now, I've written painkiller. I think it's more somas, the muscle relaxers, and then he hurts his back in ECW. Him and Lance Storm are doing these off the top rope power bombs every single night, and then the story goes on the show. Chris goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Where's the accident report?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" "Well, you were in a car crash, weren't you?" After they've done scans. And said, No, I'm just a professional wrestler. So that's quite terrifying, just like how much punishment especially in, like, you know, the 90s, where, you know, these huge moves were starting to become really prevalent, and doing them every night as well. He forms the triple threat with Bam Bam Bigelow and Shane Douglas with Francine. I'm going to move on. I might save that question for another time. Chris goes at the end of from the WWF at the end of 1996. Tammy is fired mid-1998. She was doing this whole Soma thing more recreationally speaking rather than for pain, but she got caught up in it as well and was fired. They both end up in ECW. Now, aside from the attitude and substance issues, Tammy leaving the WWF was also partially because Sable had usurped Sunny as the sort of it girl in the WWF, especially by 97. I know you left at the end of 96. But did you ever see, I know you sort of hinted towards it before, did you ever see Sunny and Sable talking together or ever being pally?
Never. And I wouldn't expect to see them together or pally. Talking about the Somas are very addictive. Mm-hmm. Sending them to Puerto Rico, or sending anybody to Puerto Rico with a substance abuse problem, is like turning a kid loose in a candy store. Exactly. Because you could go to Puerto Rico, you could buy 1,000 Somas over the counter at one time. I used to know guys who would fly to Puerto Rico just to buy Somas and fly back the same day. And they were legal. So even if they went through, baggage claim, baggage check, security, they're legal, so they couldn't do anything about it, and they'd just let it go through. See, I used to know guys, they would take like 20 Somas a day. Now, of course, the more you take, the more goofy you get and sleepy. And if you see somebody over there, they're on Soma, so they're asleep, they're passed out. And it wouldn't take but 3 or 4 or 5 of them to get you there. And we need to do an episode one time on Eddie Gilbert. Mm-hmm. He died in Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. And he said he died of a heart attack, which may be true, but I think he was Soma addicted too.
Well, the heart's a muscle.
Yes, exactly. It's a muscle relaxer, and the heart is a muscle. And what it will do, it will relax that muscle so much it just quits working. It begins to pump, and it's done.
How prevalent was it? I know you said in Puerto Rico especially the prevalent, but like how prevalent were they in Puerto Rico compared to the WWF, let's say?
Oh, hell, it was much more prevalent in WWF than it was in Puerto Rico.
Really?
Because Puerto Rico only worked 4 days a week, 3 days a week. That's all they worked. And see, what happens in WWE, they go on these long flights. You know, Bret Hart is talking about he's taking Somas to fly from Calgary to New York. That's like a 6-hour flight. And he would take them, but he took them for the right reasons. I'm not saying he got addicted on them, but he took them for the right reasons so he could sleep. Because the flight would be leaving in Calgary probably at 3 o'clock in the morning. And it's a 6-hour flight. So he would arrive about 6 in the morning, but not having any sleep. I mean, so he would take the Somas to sleep. So, but it was more prevalent in WWE than it was in Puerto Rico.
When did Somas sort of fall out of favor in the wrestling business? Do you remember?
I don't know.
I imagine it was in the 2000s, but was it?
Well, when they put it on the banned substances list, I think it fell out of favor then.
Did you notice any much use in TNA or?
Nah, well, there were some guys that took them in TNA. Kurt Angle took them. Kurt Angle told me one time he used to take 7, 8, 9 before he got out of bed. I went, what? or maybe that was
Vicodin or something. I can't.
Maybe it was Vicodin. He could probably do that. But if he took 7 or 8, I got this confused. He took 7 or 8 somas, he wouldn't be getting out of bed. He'd just go right back in there. It would knock him out.
I may not end on this. It depends. If we've got a few more minutes, I'll end on something else. But as I always say,
admit it, James. You don't have any type of schedule for this. It's just whatever.
It's when I start getting hungry, and that's when I end it.
Okay.
I mentioned this before. Chris and Tammy. Oh, you mentioned it before actually. Chris and Tammy end up in Puerto Rico. They look terrible, sleeping on the beach. That kind of thing.
On the beach.
Yeah.
On the beach. I ran into Chris one day, and I didn't see Tammy, but Chris looked like hell. And I'm sleeping on the beach in Puerto Rico is dangerous. Not only can you get robbed, or she could have got raped, and they both could have gotten killed and robbed, but you got all these animals moving around at night, or all these spiders and all this stuff. I don't know how they did it, but they got down there and they couldn't get out, because I think they were pretty good with their money at one point till they got on the drugs and before they met Paul Heyman. Because Paul Heyman, and this is Chris and Tammy's fault, mostly Chris. So he put them in charge of buying tickets, or he put them where they would buy the tickets. Sometimes the money wasn't there. Guess what these 2 damn Rhodes Scholars would do? Use their own money with the tacit understanding that Paul would reimburse them. Guess what happened? Paul didn't reimburse them. So, and they've told me this story. Chris told me this story, that he owed him thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, which I'm thinking, who would put these expensive tickets on their own personal card? Here's a story about Paul Heyman, and somebody clued me in on this. If they got you a ticket and you wanted to reimburse yourself, if you took it to the ticket office and had it changed either higher or go up to first class, you just pay the difference between what you've already paid and the first class fare. But that got your name in the purchaser's column. So if the ticket says $800, say first class was $1,000, you shoot it up to the $1,000 mark, the first class. Then when you went to be reimbursed, you get the whole $1,000 that you've only invested $200. I ran across Paul Heyman one time in some airport, and he was there a long time. I'm standing outside waiting for a cab, and I kept looking in there, and I kept looking in there, and kept looking in there. He kept pulling these, I guess it looked like tickets to me. I was outside, but that's what he was doing. So he could have stood there for 20 minutes and made him 25 grand. Man, I saw a lot of cons, but that was one I had never heard on, and I would never even think to do that. So I would think, oh, I can't do this. Somebody's going to catch it. But it was his own company, and he would do this with WWF tickets too. I don't know how they didn't catch him, but they did.
Well, they did catch him in WCW, didn't they? I think that's why Bill Watts fired him.
In ECW?
No, in WCW, like 92, 93, something like that.
That's where he was doing it. He was doing it in WCW because I saw it.
I'm going to ask this. The major question. Chris Candido starts wrestling for TNA in January 2005. You were one of the bookers there, or the booker. And after some singles matches with the likes of AJ Styles, Dustin Rhodes, and even Diamond Dallas Page, he starts tagging with Lance Hoyt, now Lance Archer, versus Apollo and Sonny Siaki. And this is Chris's last match. Chris gets his foot caught in the loose canvas, sort of does a little twisting motion and breaks his shin. 2 days later, he appears on a taped TNA TV show with his foot in a cast, and then afterwards he flies home. Now, this causes a fatal blood clot in his leg. He just apparently wasn't aware that you're not supposed to fly after surgery, and that sort of became his undoing.
They told him not to fly. They told him, do not fly. The doctor's specific instructions, because he was in Orlando, and he's from New Jersey or somewhere up there, and they knew he wanted to go back home. Or he may have asked, can I fly? No, do not fly. Do not fly. Because of this same situation that killed him, they warned him about. But he did it anyway to get back home. Tammy wasn't with him. And I think she was probably on the phone telling him to get his ass home. And so he went home, and I think he may have died before the second tape showed.
You are probably right there, yes. So I think recording maybe 2 days afterwards, and then he flies home, and then he dies, I think, that evening. I think it was blood clots caused pneumonia, then the pneumonia caused a heart attack.
It was some kind of deal. I think we used to do the show on Tuesdays, I think. And that was to give production time to get it ready to air. And we would do the next show on Wednesday, which that gave them a week and a half to get that one ready. So he was probably seen on the second show of that loop. And I think he flew home on maybe a Friday, I would think, or Thursday. And I think he died that weekend. I'm not sure on that, but I hate that too.
Yeah.
And he was doing really good. What killed Chris was the wrestling business. He wanted to be a success in it so badly, because it was like a childhood dream of his to fly the world and see the world. And see, I was never like that. When I got in wrestling, all these guys going all these different places, hell, I wasn't going to Chicago and flying there and flying back and flying to Atlanta and flying to Dallas and Houston and all this stuff. That's for the champions. I wasn't nowhere close to that. But he had seen this, and it appealed to him, and he wanted to be in the wrestling business as much as he wanted to breathe, I think. And I think the wrestling business has been the death of a lot more people than we really realize. I mentioned Eddie Gilbert a little earlier. I think the wrestling business killed him too. Yeah, we need to talk about Eddie one day. Good guy, good friend of mine.
I think we could definitely do a full show on it. I actually sort of skipped ahead really slightly when I mentioned, the last match with Chris, because what I wanted to say beforehand is that shortly before, he really cleaned up again. He started hitting the gym, and he was looking great again, and he was still in his early 30s. So he had, the majority, I mean, he started at like 13, but, for most people, he had the majority of his career ahead of him at that point. Were you instrumental, or, I mean, how did he get rehired by TNA? How did he get re-noticed?
Well, I don't know if that was I didn't hire him. I know that. I think Jeff did, probably. Our Road Dogg, maybe. But I didn't hire him. I don't know how he got there. That might be on my to-do list. I might have to call Jeff and say, how did they get there? It's funny, after you work in all these different places and somebody asks you, well, how did he get there? And you think, hell, I don't know. And you can't remember how he got there. I just know that I didn't bring him in. Sometimes when creative goes in, a lot of times creative has very little influence on who is booked and who is not booked. But I think I would have to, I'd have to say Jeff probably, he brought him in.
And to finish this off, final thoughts on Chris Candido as a talent and as a person, because you work with him in Smokey, you work with him in the WWF, you work with him in TNA, so you had some, and Puerto Rico as well, so you had some good time with him. What was he like as a person, and how good was he in the ring?
Oh, he was very good in the ring. His biggest drawback is not being a bigger type guy. 5'8" is kind of short to be in the wrestling business. I mean, because you're in the land of giants, is what you're in. And unless you want to be the Rey Mysterio of the wrestling business, and they already had one of those. So he was trying to shine in the land of giants, which is very, very hard to do. What was your question? I had my
Chris. Just Chris
how
personally.
Good was he?
Well, maybe not how good was he, but how nice of a guy was he? All I hear is that he was a great dude.
He was a great guy. He really was. Good guy, easy to get along with, and I can see him and Tom as a team. They matched each other. I mean, Chris had a more high level of energy, and Tom was like, "Yeah, man, whatever you want to do." He's laid back, But I heard Cornette talking about him. He says if Chris Candido hadn't died, I think he said this, he would be recognized as one of the greatest wrestlers. And maybe I misunderstood him. Greatest wrestlers, that he would be up there amongst the greats. I don't think he was that good, but he was good, but I don't think he'd quite reach that level. But we'd have to see. He didn't live long enough for us to see that, which was a shame. And I don't know. I didn't agree with Cornette's assessment of him. I agreed with he was a great guy, but I don't know if he'd be considered one of the all-time greats.
I think he's sort of like Owen in a sense that he stocky, well built, about 5'8", and if only they'd lived long enough to be in WWF, I suppose WWF at the time, even though Chris did, but he wasn't in the right state of mind, is that when WWF started bringing in the Eddie Guerreros and Dean Malenkos and Chris Benoits and started getting some of the smaller, really, really talented people in, Owen and Chris would have fit in just fine. They would have just been in their element.
Well, another thing about Chris, too, is he was a politicker to a point, but the politicking was mostly Tammy doing his politicking for him. Now, the other politicking was, all those guys at one time. It was Jericho and it was, Eddie Guerrero, and they all got together, I think, in Mexico and decided to try their hand in WWE. And somebody got interested in them and brought them in, and they did some great stuff. Eddie Guerrero not only had the moves, he had the personality, because he had that little shit-eating grin he'd do, and people, they liked that. They legitimately liked Eddie. So, and plus his work spoke for itself anyway. They would do moves that American fans they'd never seen. And I'm sure they're still trying to invent moves in Mexico that the American fans have never seen. But don't show Jungle Boy, because he will do it. After I put up on Twitter that, hey, this move he did with, who do you do it with?
Was it the guy where he nearly breaks his neck, Jungle Boy?
Yeah. It's a like body suplex off the apron, and he hits. I'm thinking, man, you won't be able to do many of those. And then somebody showed me that it was done by Brian Daniels about 2 months earlier. But I'm going to tell you, in Brian's case, it's even more shocking that he did it because he's older.
He's in his 50s now, I think, Chris Daniels.
Not Chris Daniels.
Oh.
Brian Danielson.
Brian Danielson.
No. Yeah. I don't think he's that old, but Chris Daniels.
No, Chris Daniels is definitely, yeah.
He's in his 50s. So.
I want to correct one thing briefly, is the Jerichos and the Eddie Guerreros, they all went to WCW first for several years and had various successes there. The funny thing is that WWF had the option to hire Chris Benoit in 1995. They brought him in for 3, maybe, dark matches. They even had Ted DiBiase as his manager. Not that he got anyone really over as a manager, but just my opinion. But and they just passed on him because guess what? He was 5'8", 5'9", and they didn't want him.
Yeah, I'd kind of see. Listen, this is when you're a storyteller. Don't let facts and stuff get in the way of a good story. Then all you got to say is, "Oh yeah, I kind of forgot that," and then just move right ahead with. Yeah, they were in WCW first.
4 billion views every episode. That's what we're getting.
You know what I heard about? What's the guys that was one of them, and he had a brother in the business, and he's an agent now. What is his name? Dean Malenko.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has Parkinson's.
I believe you're right. Yeah, well, he is very ill with something.
Because I got on a plane one day, and this is when you run into a lot of wrestlers. You get on a plane one day, and they're on. And you say hello and all, and he's sitting right behind me, but I was looking at his hand, and his hand was doing that. What is Parkinson's?
It's that. Is it like a, not neurological?
It is a nerve.
Yeah, but you can't control movement, and it makes it very, very difficult just to live your life, and it's a degenerative condition that there's no cure for. You can manage or mitigate some of the... I'll give you this example. I remember driving down, and it was comical watching it until I realised why he was doing it. An old fella was hobbling down the road. This is in a country road, no one was crossing. No cars going either way. It was really quiet, and this old fella is in front of me. And then he gets off the pavement and starts on one leg bunny hopping across the road. And it's a wide road as well. I mean, I turned around to my sister, who probably was in the car. I said, "What was that about? That was bonkers." And she actually knew what it was. It's like he probably struggles to walk quickly, and he's found out that through Parkinson's, somehow bunny hopping he can still do, and that makes him cross the road quicker. It's a horrible, horrible disease to deal with, and it's like Michael J. Fox has had it for decades.
Yeah, he has.
You know, there's some famous people who have had it, but yeah, it's one of those really evil.
You know who else has it too? Carlos Colon.
Oh, really?
They were doing something with him, and they really couldn't have him on camera. I don't think that much, or just his face, because his hand was doing that. So I hate it, but we're all going that same direction. So just I don't know. I hate that. So
on that note, I'm gonna. Normally, I like to end with a cheerier note than that, but
cheer this damn podcast up. Damn.
Yeah, Dan, we'll be back next week with cheerier stories. Let me tell you, for goodness' sake, heavens to Murgatroyd. For now, my last note is pay Dutch. So I'm gonna stop this podcast. I'm gonna pay you. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching. We will be back next week. Don't forget, brand new shirt link is in the description of every video and of this podcast, so click on it right damn now. And there are books as well, Tales from a Dirt Road. Dutch also has The World According to Dutch, and they're available on Amazon. If you want them signed, you go to dirtydutchmantell with 2 L's at gmail.com. But for now, thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you again next week. We the people.